Hello everybody, welcome to PJ Chapter Book Time. Yesterday we started this fun book called How to Eat Fried Worms by Thomas Rockwell. And the story begins by us meeting, as many stories do, the main characters in the story, Tom, Billy, Joe, and Alan. Billy is going to become the worm eater. He decides that he's willing to eat one worm a day for 15 days. Being that there's 15 worms, he says he can eat anything for $50, which is what the money he wants to earn to buy a used mini bike. Alan is the kind of the instigator of the whole thing. He's the one that sets Billy up and says, you know, Billy, you say you can eat anything, how about worms? So he bets him the $50. And then Joe and Tom are kind of along for the ride. Tom is trying to protect his friend Billy, to make this not quite so onerous. So we'll find out how that works out for them. So yesterday when we left off, the boys had gone out to gather the worms so that Billy could have his first feast. So we're going to start tonight with Chapter 4, and the first worm. Let me just get over here closer to my pal so that they can see the book as I read. Chapter 4, the first worm. The huge nightcrawler sprawled limply in the center of the platter, brown and steaming. Boiled, said Tom. We boiled it. No, that was the other deal, too, if you remember. Billy said, I'll eat the worms, but I have to choose how they're cooked, and I get to use any condiment I want, ketchup, mustard, relish, horseradish, honey. So the first one looks like it's going to be boiled. Billy stormed about the barn, kicking barrels and posts, arguing, a nightcrawler isn't a worm. If it was a worm, it'd be called a worm. A nightcrawler is a nightcrawler. Finally, Joe ran off to get his father's dictionary. Nightcrawler, this is what he found. Earthworm, especially a large earthworm found on the soil surface at night. Billy kicked a barrel. Oh, it still wasn't fair. He didn't care what any dictionary said. Everybody knew the difference between a nightcrawler and a worm. Look at that thing. Ugh. It was as big as a souvenir pencil from the Empire State Building. Yuck. He poked at it with his finger. Oh my gosh, what do you think? Is he going to actually eat it? Alan said they'd agreed right at the start that he and Joe would choose the worms. If Billy was going to cheat, the bet was off. He got up and started for the door. He guessed he had other things to do besides argue all day with a fink. So Tom took Billy aside into a horse stall and put his arm around Billy's shoulders and talked to him about George Cunningham's brother's mini bike and how they would ride it on the trail under the power lines behind Odell's farm, up and down the hills, bounding over rocks, rum-pum. Sure, it was a big worm, but it would only be a couple more bites. Did he want to lose a mini bike over 2 bites? Slap enough mustard and ketchup and horseradish on it, and he wouldn't even taste it. Yeah, said Billy, I could probably eat this one. But I gotta eat 15. Oh, you can't quit now, said Tom. Look at them. He nodded at Alan and Joe, waiting beside the orange crates. They'll tell everybody you're a chicken. It'll be all over school. Come on. He led Billy back to the orange crates, sat him down, tied the napkin around his neck. Alan flourished the knife and fork. Would monsieur like to eat the carved lengthwise or crosswise? Ketchup? Asked Joe, showing his teeth. Oh, cut it out, said Tom. Here. He glopped ketchup and mustard and horseradish on the nightcrawler, squeezed on a few drops of lemon juice, and salted and peppered it. Oh, even that sounds disgusting. Billy closed his eyes and opened his mouth. Ooh-a-teen. Tom sliced off the end of the nightcrawler and forked it up, but just as he was about to poke it into Billy's open mouth, Billy closed his mouth and opened his eyes. No, let me do it. Tom handed him the fork. Billy gazed at the dripping ketchup and mustard, thinking, ugh, it's all right talking about eating worms, but doing it? Tom whispered in his ear, mini bike. Gluck. Billy poked the fork into his mouth, chewed furiously, gulped, his eyes crossed, swam, squinched shut, He flapped his arms wildly, and then, opening his eyes, he grinned beatifically up at Tom. Superb, Gaston! Tom cut another piece, ketchup, mustard, salted, peppered, horseradished, and lemoned it, and handed the fork to Billy. Billy slugged it down, smacking his lips. So they proceeded, now sprinkling on cinnamon and sugar or a bit of cheese, some cracker crumbs, a Worcestershire sauce, until there was nothing on the plate but a few stray dabs of ketchup and mustard. Well, said Billy, standing up and wiping his mouth with his napkins. So, we are done with the first course. No seconds? Let me look in your mouth, said Alan. Yeah, said Joe, see if he swallowed it all. Certainly, said Billy. Look as long as you want. Alan and Joe scrutinized the inside of his mouth. Okay, said Tom. Leave him alone now. Come on. 1 down, 14 to go. How'd it taste? Asked Alan. Good, said Billy. Very fine. Hoo-hoo. He flapped his arms like a big bird. He began to hop around the barn crying, good, very fine, good. Alan and Joe and Tom looked worried. Yeah, good. How are you feeling, Billy? Tom asked. Yeah, stop flapping around and come tell us how you're feeling, said Joe. Look at this picture. There they are. He's flapping his arms, and there's the boys watching him like, oh my goodness, maybe we've gone too far. They huddled together by the orange crates as Billy hopped around and around them, flapping his arms. Good, very fine, hoo-hoo. Alan whispered, he's crackers. Joe edged toward the door. Don't let him see we're afraid. Crazy people are like dogs. If they see you're afraid, they'll attack. It couldn't be, whispered Tom, standing on the ground. 1 worm? Good, screeched Billy, hopping higher and higher and drooling from the mouth. Come on, whispered Joe to Tom. Hey, Billy, burst out Tom suddenly in a hearty, quavering voice. Cut it out, will you? I want to ask you something. Billy's arms flapped lower. He tiptoed menacingly around Tom, his head cocked to one side, his cheeks puffed out. Tom hugged himself, chuckling nervously. Cut it out, will you, Billy? Billy pounced. Joe and Alan fled, the barn door banging behind them. Billy rolled on the floor, helpless with laughter. Tom clambered up, brushing himself off. Did you see their faces? Billy said, laughing. Climbing over each other out the door. Oh, geez, Joe's as pale as an onion. Yeah, said Tom. Ha, you fooled them. Ha, geez, Billy sat up. Then he crawled over to the door and peered out through the knothole. Look at them, peeking up over the stone wall. Watch this. The door swung slowly open. Screeching, Billy hopped onto the doorsill and into the yard. Up onto a stump, splash into a puddle, flapping his arms and rolling his head. Alan and Joe galloped up the hill through the high grass, yelling, Here he comes! Get out of the way! And then Billy stopped hopping and climbed up on the stump, called in a shrill, girlish voice, Oh, boys, where are you going? I'd something weird. Did something scare you, little boys? Sorry, I wasn't sure what they were saying there. Alan and Joe stopped and looked back. Are you going home, little boys? Yelled Billy. Are you scared? Who's scared, you lump? Called Alan. Yeah, yelled Joe. I guess I can go home without being called scared if I want to. But are you in an awful hurry? Shouted Billy. I just remembered I was supposed to help my mother wash windows this afternoon, said Alan. That's all. He turned and started up through the meadow, his hands in his pockets. Yeah, said Joe, me too. And he trudged after Alan. Alan and Joe stopped in the orchard by the pile of fresh dirt. You think you'll be able to do it? Asked Alan, biting his thumbnail. I don't know, said Joe. He can't do it, said Alan. How could anybody eat 15 worms? My father'll take that one awful easy." "Forget it," said Joe. "If he doesn't give up himself, I'll figure something out. We could spike the next worm with pepper. He'd eat one piece and then another, talking to Tom, and then all of a sudden he'd sneeze, ka-choo, and then he'd sneeze again, ka-choo, and again, ka-choo, ka-choo." A faint look of panic would creep over his face. He's beginning to wonder if he'll ever stop. He clutches his stomach. His eyes begin to water, ka-choo, ka-choo. "Billy's awfully stubborn," said Alan. "Even if it was killing him, he might not give up." "Ka-choo, ka-choo," cried Joe. "He'll fall to the floor. I'll bend over him. Gosh, I'll say, call his mother. It's the troglycerosis." His eyes bleed up at me. "Ka-choo!" "Remember that business last summer?" said Alan, gnawing on his thumbnail. "When it was 95 degrees in the shade and I dared him to put on all his winter clothes and his father's raccoon coat and his ski boots and walk up and down Main Street all afternoon? Ka-choo, ka-choo." They went off through the orchard, Joe sneezing and sighing and rolling his eyes, pretending to be Billy suffering from a dose of peppered worm. Alan moaning to himself about how stubborn Billy could be. $50. Let's see. How about if we do one more? We'll get on to the second worm. We're now up to chapter 4, the second worm. Billy sighed. On the plate before him lay the last bite of worm under a daub of ketchup and mustard. "What's the matter?" asked Tom. "I don't know." He picked up the fork again. "Does it taste bad?" "No," said Billy wearily. "I just taste ketchup and mustard mostly, but it makes me feel sort of sick, even before I eat it, just thinking about it." He sighed again, and then glanced at Joe and Alan, talking to each other in whispers over by the window. "What are you whispering about?" "Nothing." "Then what are you whispering for?" "Nothing. It's not important. Just something Joe's father told him last night." "What?" "Come on, finish up. It was nothing. We'll miss the cartoons." Billy shut his eyes and popped the last piece of worm into his mouth, chewed, gagged, clapped his hand over his mouth, gulped, and toppled backwards off the orange crate. Sprawling on his back in the chaff, he gazed peacefully up at the ceiling. Joe and Alan stood over him. "Open up." Billy opened his mouth. "Wider. Do you see any, Joe?" "Nah," he swallowed it. "All right, let's go." Okay, so tomorrow night we'll start Chapter 7, Red Crash Helmets and White Jumpsuits. The story is crazy, but it is kind of funny. I hope you're enjoying it. I'll see you tomorrow.